Good afternoon and welcome to the afternoon edition. My name is Isa Nu. Just before now, you watched the live streaming of the FCTA Recognition Award. And you know, definitely, when it comes to the duty we carry out virtually every day, there is that particular aspect of us that even gives us that self-appraisal. If people don't reward you for the goodness you've been doing or for the hard work you've put into the labor, definitely you have to appraise yourself and say, yes, I'm doing better. But then, as the time goes by, we've seen that, yes, the Federal Capital Territory have been able to, the Federal Capital Territory Administration have been able to put up so many structures that have to also assist the residents within the FCTA to make sure that, yes, even them, they contribute to the success of what we are witnessing today. And for those that we are awarded, it is indeed another huge task ahead for them to make sure that they don't drop on that pedestal. So my name still is Isa Nu, and today we shall be focusing on the issue of food security, the role of town planners. Well, people will be surprised. Why town planners? What do they have to do with agriculture? Indeed, they have so much to do with agriculture. But let me just quickly give you this snippet that among the basic essentials for life, air, water, shelter, and food, planners have traditionally addressed them, all with the conspicuous exception of food. This was the puzzling omission that provoked the American Planning Association to produce the seemingly or the seminal policy guide on community and regional food planning in 2007, a belated attempt to make amends for the fact that the planning community, academics and professionals alike had signally failed to engage with the food system. What are the planners running away from? But then, urban planners might justify this puzzling omission by claiming that the food system is largely a rural issue and therefore beyond the scope of the urban planning agenda. But there are two reasons as to why this argument fails to provide a convincingly explanation. Firstly, the multifunctional character of the food system means that it has profound effect on a host of other sectors, including the public health, the social justice system, the energy, water, land, transport, and economic development. And these are all the sectors in which planners are deemed to have a legitimate interest. So secondly, the notion that food production is an exclusively rural activity fails to appreciate the significance of urban agriculture, an activity that never disappeared in the hungry crisis or cities of the global south, and one which is reappearing in the more sustainable cities of the global north, where urban designers are reimagining the city as a farm. Today, we have a specialist in that particular profession, who is known as Dr. Jason Knorr. He is a town planner, a well-known town planner in the Federal Capital Territory, who will be giving us, or will be dissecting the issue on which role will the urban planners play, most especially when it comes to the issue of food security. Do they have a role? Will he be able to close that gap? So let's take a very short break, and when we start the conversation, I believe it will be very, very interesting for you to know that, yes, even urban planners have something to do with everything you do every day.
Our first efforts at democracy and self-government were abruptly arrested in the mid-60s, largely as a result of the incongenial atmosphere engendered by the uncompromising stance adopted by the political parties of the First Republic. Thus, opportunities were lost for our people to interact and learn to accommodate different points of view for the betterment of the country. We must not allow that episode to repeat itself. The new system that we'll have adopted presents us with yet another opportunity to achieve national integration, which is a prerequisite for the building of a strong and virile nation.
Nigeria as a free state in 20th century Africa is the need to revive the stature of man in Africa and restore the dignity of man in the world. Nigerians believe passionately in the fundamental human rights. We regard all races of the human family as equal. Under no circumstance shall we accept the idea that the black race is inferior to any other race. I appeal to all our leaders, far and near, to forget the wounds which were inflicted in cause of our internecine altercation. The love of our country should outweigh the love of our petty selves. The enjoyment of individual freedom under the law should mean more to us than our self-centered party programs and manifestos. Common dangers and common enemies alert us on the need for common security. Come and join Abubakar with me, Sadauna, Awolowo, Akitola, Osarebe, Okpara, Ikoku, Aminu Kano, Ibrahim Imam, and Saka. Let us bind the nation's wound and let us heal the breaches of the past so that in forging our nation, there shall emerge on this continent a hate-free, fear-free, and greed-free people who shall be in the vanguard of a world task force whose assignment is not only to revive the stature of man in Africa, but to restore the dignity of man in the world.
Welcome back from that mile break. And just before the break, I did inform you that the FCTA recognized many, or let me say most, of the staff that have performed excellently. And I did stated that even at the intro, so that you can have a sense of recognition that, look, whatsoever you do in your corner, people pay attention to. And when you're hardworking, people will recognize you. So for you, those who were recognized today, there's another ball for you to kick to make sure that, yes, you don't lose it next when the recognition will be made available again. So before the break, I did also inform you that we're having Dr. Jiz Nur, who is a town planner and an expert in that particular field, because I've seen him do what he knows how to do best. But then today we have him here in the studio to give us an inkling of the role that has to do with food security, town planners, and then how climate change is really affecting this. So, Doctor, good afternoon and welcome to the afternoon edition.
Yeah, hi. Nice to have you on the show.
It's nice having you on the show. I know how busy you are because it took me so much time to pull you out of your comfort zone, to come down here to give us a very understandable way that we can understand the process of town planners and then the role they play in mitigating this climate change and how it also affects agriculture. So what is your take on the issue of food security and town planning?
Okay, I think first of all we need to lay down some fundamentals, right? This year, the Food and Agriculture Organization sets a sort of statistics about the nature of what we're dealing with as concerns food security in the country. It puts up this figure that between June and August, about 25.3 million Nigerians will experience food crisis. And that underscores what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a huge problem, and it connects to so many drivers. There's a driver that connects to environment, climate change, which you talk about, or you mentioned. There are other big drivers to issues of political instability, and the issues of policy and all that. So all of these interwoven come together to give us this sort of thing we're going to deal with in terms of food security and the challenge. But it's good for us to underscore that between June and August, you're dealing with a chunk of Nigerians, 25.3 million Nigerians that will experience food crisis. That's something that both the private sector, both professionals, and both governments should be concerned about. In the context of planning, which you were trying to ask me, in terms of the nexus between climate change, food crisis, and what planning, the role of planning. The role of planning here is broad. If you take, let's start with the issue of food, for instance. Right? Largely, Nigeria is this sort of an agrarian society. And much of these activities are done in the rural areas, regional areas, right? Now, the critical role planning does here is in terms of this regional development planning. Planners over the years have been bringing up regional plans. Regional plans articulate the production system of these rural areas. And you can't talk about production system of these rural areas without deepening or connecting to where some of these agricultural practices should take place. So largely, one of the problems we've been dealing with is the failure of having effective regional planning and development, which for some time now has been sort of neglected. So the critical role planners have been addressing or can also deepen this food crisis is to go back to regional planning. Regional planning, the planners will set the tone for where the economy of the regional areas are going. And to talk about the economy, you have to talk about where the agriculture is. They will identify the nodes, to identify the linkages, to identify the markets, to identify even externalities where the agricultural produces should sort of connect to that. So the starting point is going back to this regional planning, identifying these rural areas that are producing, map them out, understand the economy, understand their resources, and also create a sort of linkages. And so that's one of the things that planners can also address as regards to food crisis, and that connects to regional plan. There are other factors, or other things.
Okay, please, you can just go in, but then before you go in, looking at the FCT itself, do we have that system of planning effectively for both the rural and then the urban area, making sufficiency for both community?
FCT is quite interesting. It's interesting because right from the go, FCT sets out to be this model, and everything was set up from day one in terms of even the master plan for the city, Federal Capital City, and in the regional plans for the regional areas. Those plans were all mapped out. Plans were developed, were articulated, set the timeline, set the population, set the targets, set where the economy would be in terms of the regional areas. So FCT hasn't been left out. FCT has had these plans. The only challenge over the years, because of issues of poor implementation, policy drift, which is a common feature in cities of the Global South, And so policy drift and all that has sort of undermined the implementation of these regional plans across FCT. Had this plan been implemented, you would have seen the regional areas of FCT quite robust in terms of economy, production, quite robust in terms of maybe in terms of tourism. So many things that are way encapsulated in this regional plan. So it requires that we go back again. We go back again to review where it's necessary, because some of the projections that were captured in these regional plans now, time has sort of gone past, So it requires going back, reviewing some of the regional plans where necessary, or even evolving new ones. But it's critical that FCT is quite swelling up in terms of population, and the regional areas are now the ones absorbing this population. You're dealing with political instability across the country, and a lot of people are coming to FCT. Safety is as a safe haven. So the populations are swelling up. So regional areas now need to have this sort of renewed, robust regional plans so that regional development can have that sort of bite in it too.
Okay, now with this swelling up of the central area, for instance, let us take just like the Amak, and then that of the Buhari, we look forward to maybe Kuje, somewhere close by thereabout. But then when you talk about Abaji, for instance, you talk about the other one, is it Kwali? When you talk about some of these other local council area, which I believe they are the regional area, if I'm right, from your explanation. When you look at this particular setting now, if you look in the past, there have been issues of flooding. And these are areas where we have some of these agricultural activities taking place. You had this aircraft in the Amak Center, that huge, that commercial. And then in those days, you definitely get to know that when flooding takes place, it affects most of their agricultural activities in those areas. And as a result of that, there's high cost of food and the rest of it like
Absolutely.
that. Now, how can town planners help? Because we are now at that point where the rainy season have started, the expectation that it will continue to increase with time. How can town planners help to resolve or to mitigate some of these challenges?
Well, that's first of all, we're a bit lucky this year. We're a bit lucky this year because the projection by NIMET in terms of the seasonal climate projection puts it that this year the rainfall is going to be normal, although it might start earlier, and then we might also have this sort of flash flooding. So we're a bit lucky when you compare to last year, where you had about 2.4 million people that were displaced and huge investment cut off. So we're a bit lucky. Now, the critical role of planners here, we are concerned with planning. We're concerned with mapping out. We're concerned with designing, land use planning, all that. So our planners, in terms of flooding, we designate where some of these activities should be, where places are liable for flooding. These land use activities are completely, in terms of intensive activity and all that, completely taken off. So the critical role here is the planning. And planners, before they plan, there's a thorough sort of assessment of what should be and what shouldn't be. And so some of the critical places that are liable for flooding, land use plan will identify them. These places are liable. These places activities shouldn't be. That's in terms of design and all that. In terms of urban management, you're also dealing with drainages and all that. Drainages should be properly constructed, properly maintained. So the critical role of planners is both in terms of design, where the entire city is mapped out, different kinds of land uses articulated, and also in terms of preserving the environment, where if you have floodlands or floodable areas or areas that are susceptible to flooding are quite kind of left in that natural pristine state. And then beyond design or designing or framing these land uses, it's also about city management. The drainages have to be properly maintained. Drainages have to be constructed, open up in other areas. But when you're dealing with flooding, flooding is not just a one-actor thing. It's sort of it's multifaceted, and different actors need to be on board. The planners will create the plans, absolutely. The planners still need a political voice for these plans to be implemented, absolutely. So even though you have the plans that says, well, this place are left as natural drainage channels, these places are left in their present state, so we don't cause flooding and all that. We need plans for drainage system and all that. The political voice was important because you need finance, you need all that. So it's sort of interwoven, but the bottom line is the planners are active. In terms of Abuja here, planners have had to designate where this flood or flood-prone areas are. Planners have had to even remove structures on floodplains. Planners have had to even prosecute people who violate some of these things or try to encroach on floodplains. And managing the city is also quite expensive. So within their resources, they're trying to manage the city in terms of cleaning up the drainages, open up the sewer lines and all that. I'm sure as you go around the city, you see the planning agencies doing some of these things. See development control, removing structures on floodable areas. You see APB doing some of these things. Of course, it may not absolutely be at the scale upon which we want this sort of management or sort of these things to be, but it's work in progress, right? It's work in progress.
But people do complain that, for instance, like the FCT, the expectation is that FCT is bordered by about 4 or 5 states.
Yeah.
And these states are also agrarian states. And most often when there's this issue of flooding, it also affects them. If not last year, that I think FEMA did so much work within the FCT. And then if you compare last year and the year before, you discover that there was a bit of improvement. Well, this year, the rain just started. And the concern of the agrarian community now is if it happens, even just like that of last year, for instance, it still affects them. And town planners, I believe, if you go to Kano, for instance, what they did was for them to have this, what do they call it now? There's a drainage system they adopt. And I believe which was something that was pushed from the town planning division of the state for them to be able to have a better way to channel some of this water in such a way that it is not going to affect their crops and the rest of life. But now in the FCT, we've not actually seen that so much, most of it in these agrarian communities.
I'm not sure. Well,
I'm
not sure because
yeah.
because first of all, there's so many things that you lock them.
Yeah,
together.
I lock them together. Okay.
First of all, you're talking about city alliances,
Okay.
right? City alliances, where you're talking about the regions or the regional areas coming together from alliance and see and how they can better themselves. That's one aspect of what you're saying.
Okay.
The rest aspect, you're bringing other examples from Kano and
Drainage system and the rest, yeah.
How do you really want me to approach this?
Well, the reason why I'm bringing this is because the FCT is like a center point.
Okay.
Where when this flooding starts, when it affects Nasarawa, it comes into...
Of course, the externalities.
So there's that particular passage that also comes down to the FCT. And you know the FCT also have agrarian communities.
Yes, of course.
And this water, when it comes in, definitely it affects some of them. So in this case, what role now will the town planners play to see that it will not have devastating impact on those farmers?
First and foremost, cities don't exist in isolation. Okay. And that's why I mentioned in passing, I mentioned in passing the aspect of city alliances. You know, cities connect with each other. They connect with, even in terms of the governance framework. They connect in terms of their vision, shared vision. You know, FCT with the neighboring states can't exist in isolation. That's one from the main thread that we need to put out, or the city managers or those who are managing these regions or these states need to know. Cities don't exist in isolation, and so over the years, you have had cities had alliances. In the context of FCT, right? FCT has also been sort of engaging with these neighboring states and all that. But in particular to this drainage you're talking about, agriculture is important. So it's fundamental that the FCT government will now liaise with the adjoining states or the neighboring regions and then create the necessary funds, and then the drainage is created, and the drainage can also be tapped to support irrigation and all that. The farmers who are affected, of course, there's need to boost agriculture. So we are necessary. Government can also give some support.
But then what role now will the town planners play as a body?
What role now? First of all, I started in terms of the governance structure. Yeah. The planners will articulate what sort of city alliance that should exist between FCT and the neighboring states in terms of how they can govern and manage the externalities that exist between Abuja and this one. That's the first role. Creating the governance structure is very important. Cities don't exist in isolation, and planners have to create a governance structure that cuts across the neighboring states and takes advantage of externalities. That's very important. Two, the planners have to look at the environmental drivers. Where is this water coming from? Where's the source of this water? Where's this water radiating out from? And the planners will now design what sort of drainage system that this should go. They will now put that on the paper, put on the design, and engineers will now see how that drainage is constructed. So first is creating that governance structure is very important, which is the big picture. Second is the design aspect. And then thirdly, planners are also advocates. So planners can also advocate a case where these farming communities need to be given surplus, need to be supported, need to be given some sort of package for them to go back into their productive system, because this has been cut off by natural factors, natural hazards. Over the years, even in the US, where there are natural hazards, government comes in to support them. So first is that governance structure, which is very important. Planners will now frame what sort of governance structure that exists between the FCT and the regional areas. Planners will look at the design aspect, underscore where this water is coming from and where the water is radiating out, and what advantage can be taken out of this water, whether in terms of irrigation, right? And the planners can also act as advocates where they say, come on, these people are providing economy, they are the drivers of the economy, they've been affected by this drainage, so some certain sort of package should be given to them to continue their livelihood, so that the economy of the region is sort of
scale.
Yeah.
Okay, just on a final note, and I want you to give us like a kind of relief from your perspective, being a town planner, your advice on what we should take note of, most especially as we drive into this full-scale rainy season.
Oh wow! It's not so scary like last year. because the prediction,
Probably because of what happened last year, people still have that mindset.
Was scary, the prediction by NAMED's seasonal climate prediction is not so scary.
Okay.
Although we're going to have flash flood.
Yeah.
It's not so scary, but flooding is a dangerous thing. It's something that all actors must take note of. The government, the private sector must take note. And the role of planning here is quite critical. Planning sets out where the land uses should be. We should respect certain land uses where there are floodplains, lived in the way they are, and also this other thing about agriculture is also important. Yeah. We need to understand that when flooding comes, it cuts off agriculture, it cuts off investment, whether in terms of transportation, infrastructure, and all of that. So it's important that we take it serious and we begin to plan for.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jesse Noor, and it's nice having you today because my plan was for us to have a very lengthy time to discuss this issue, but then you know, issues definitely, live streaming program and the rest will definitely interrupt some of our programs, and it's nice having you, and definitely we'll be inviting you one more time, probably when the rain has fully established itself, so that you can tell us more about it. So this is how far we can go today on the afternoon edition. Sorry, we will not be able to take more than this because of the live streaming event that we covered earlier on, and definitely we'll be bringing you more of this episode tomorrow by God's grace. Have a wonderful day and stay blessed. My name is Issa Noon.